Hello everyone, and welcome to another session of Reddit Revenge Tales. I dedicated years of my life to building my parents' Italian eatery. This meant years of 70-hour workweeks, sacrificing holidays, and destroying personal relationships. It was years of hearing family is everything while simultaneously being treated as mere hired help and the family outcast. In the end, they betrayed me. This is my account of what happened. Today's main story, sent in by one of our channel's viewers, begins this way. My journey at Pupper's Place began when I was just 16 years old. My parents had acquired a failing Italian restaurant in our hometown and required everyone to pitch in. My older, golden child brother was away at university pursuing a business degree, leaving just my mom, my dad, and me to keep the business from going under. I immersed myself in every aspect of the operation: how to manage inventory, negotiate with suppliers, placate difficult customers, and repair the walk-in cooler at 2 in the morning after it failed. I left community college after a single semester because my parents required my full-time assistance. My brother completed his degree and secured a corporate position 3 states away. His visits were limited to Christmas and Thanksgiving, during which he would sample our cuisine, critique the wine list, and promptly depart. In contrast, I was present every single day. I overhauled the menu, secured new vendors which reduced our food expenditures by 20%, trained the entire staff, managed all the accounting, and essentially ran the whole business as my parents enjoyed increasingly extended holidays. By the time I turned 28, I was the heart and soul of the restaurant. My parents might appear 3 days a week to chat with familiar customers and feel a sense of ownership, but I was the one ensuring we were stocked with fresh basil, that health inspections were passed without issue, and that the staff was paid on schedule. I knew every single recipe by memory, maintained strong relationships with all our suppliers, and could manage a dinner service rush with my eyes shut. My compensation was not substantial. My parents gave me a family salary, which was effectively minimum wage supplemented by tips from a communal jar for the kitchen crew. They consistently assured me that, one day, the restaurant would belong to me. "You are the only one who truly has a passion for this place," my dad would often say. "Your brother has his high-powered corporate career. This is your legacy." I took them at their word, which was foolish of me. But I believed them. Then, my brother was laid off due to some corporate downsizing, and all of a sudden, he developed a keen interest in the family enterprise. He began visiting every couple of weeks with his wife, discussing ways to maximize profit margins and leverage our brand equity. My parents were completely captivated. Their golden boy was finally showing an interest in their legacy. He proposed changes, ridiculous changes, I should note, such as eliminating our fresh pasta program to cut costs, despite it being our defining feature, or transitioning to prepackaged sauces. My parents gave it serious thought simply because he possessed a business degree. I held my peace, assuming he was just trying to feel significant after losing his job. I thought he would eventually grow bored and move on. But then they called the family conference. My parents summoned me to the dining room one Monday when the restaurant was closed. My brother and his wife were also present, seated at the large table with somber expressions. My first thought was that someone was ill. "We've been considering succession planning," my dad began. "We aren't getting any younger. At last, I thought, they are finally going to formalize it. We have made the decision to transfer ownership of the restaurant to your brother," my mom concluded. "He has the business education and the background in managing large-scale operations." I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I was certain it was a joke, but their faces remained completely serious. "Are you serious?" I inquired. "I have been managing this place for over a decade. He doesn't even know the recipe for marinara sauce." "This isn't a matter of cooking," my brother interjected. "It's a matter of business administration. Mom and Dad require someone who can elevate this business. I've expanded this business by 30% year over year for the past 5 years," I retorted. "And we are grateful for that," my dad said. "You'll continue to work here, of course. Your brother will require your expertise in the kitchen. Work for him." I was in disbelief at what I was hearing. "You're going to have me work for him?" "It is what is best for the family," my mother stated, using a tone that signaled the end of the conversation. I glanced at my brother. He had a slight smirk on his face, and it was in that moment I realized this wasn't just about them wanting someone with a degree in charge. This was about him needing to reassert himself as the successful one. Having lost his prestigious corporate role, he needed to feel important again, and my parents were handing him my life's work on a silver platter. Let me understand this correctly, I said slowly. I have dedicated 12 years to this establishment. I know every vendor, every recipe, and every regular's favorite meal. I've repaired equipment at 3 a.m., worked every holiday, and personally trained every employee on our payroll. And you're giving it to him because he has a diploma from a university I couldn't afford to complete because I was working here. Don't be so dramatic, my brother said. You'll still have employment. I'm considering bringing you on as a kitchen manager. A decent salary, benefits, the whole package. How magnanimous, I replied, offering me a position in the restaurant I single-handedly built. From that point on, the meeting deteriorated. My parents continued to speak of family loyalty and how it was their prerogative. My brother kept using corporate jargon that was essentially meaningless. His wife just sat there, looking at her phone. I departed without uttering another word. That night, lying in my apartment, I reflected on all my sacrifices. Relationships that crumbled because I was perpetually at the restaurant. Friends who ceased inviting me out because I was never free for them. The girlfriend who left after I cancelled our vacation for 3 consecutive years because the restaurant demanded my presence. My entire adult existence had revolved around that place. And the truth is, I wasn't entirely shocked. I had always been the black sheep of this family. My brother was the intelligent one, the high achiever, the one who made our parents proud by pursuing a real career. I was simply the kid who was skilled with his hands, enjoyed cooking, and, in their view, wasn't bright enough for college. That's how they had always perceived me. And by the way, everyone, just to interject for a moment, my heart really goes out to OP. If you were in his position, what would your course of action have been? Would you simply accept their decision, or would you seek some form of retribution? Share your thoughts on what you would do in the comments below. And while you're there, please remember to subscribe and like the video if you'd like to support me. Thank you very much. Anyway, I was finished with being perceived that way. I did not return to the restaurant. I called the next day to tender my resignation. My dad phoned me 12 times. My mom sent a series of long text messages about family duties, and my brother sent a single text that said, "Grow up." I was half expecting a threat about a non-compete clause, but we never had a formal employment agreement. All our arrangements were based on handshakes and family duty. This absence of formal documentation, however, turned out to be to my advantage. First, I blocked all of them and began to formulate a plan. You see, there were things they were unaware of. Since I had been running the restaurant, I knew things they didn't. I knew which vendors offered the most competitive prices and highest quality. I knew which local farms grew exceptional produce. I knew which wine distributors offered discounts for bulk purchases. I knew the best sous chef in the area was dissatisfied with his current position and would be open to a better offer. But I also knew every single health code violation my parents had been ignoring for years. To be clear, these were not minor infractions. The walk-in cooler had been operating at a higher temperature for months, hovering around 47 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit instead of the mandated 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. I had managed it by constantly rotating inventory and storing the most delicate items in the refrigerator. But it meant we were technically keeping food at hazardous temperatures. The grease trap hadn't been thoroughly cleaned in years. We also had a chronic mouse issue, which we managed with traps rather than sealing the entry points. The ceiling tiles in the kitchen showed water damage and likely had mold. The dishwasher wasn't reaching a high enough temperature for proper sanitation. I had intended to address all these issues and had mentioned them to my parents on numerous occasions, but repairs were expensive, and they always deferred it to the next quarter, or the next year, or when our cash flow improved. I had been treating the symptoms rather than curing the underlying issues because I believed I would eventually own the place and could fix it properly. but it was not destined to be mine. And my brother, with his business degree and management experience, was oblivious to all of this. My parents had probably never mentioned it to him. I mean, why would they? I was the one who handled the day-to-day grind. I spent a week assembling a comprehensive business plan. I had savings, not a huge amount, but enough. I had lived frugally since all my time was devoted to the restaurant. I began researching small business loans. The bank was hesitant due to my low reported income on tax returns, but I had been setting money aside and had a robust business plan ready. I also provided letters of intent from my supplier contacts who were prepared to offer me favorable terms, demonstrating to the loan officer that I already had established industry connections. My credit was excellent because I lived a simple life with no debt. It wasn't a massive loan, but paired with my savings, it was sufficient to get started. I secured a location, a storefront that was a former breakfast spot. It had a solid structure but needed renovations. The permitting process was longer than anticipated, and the construction was plagued by minor delays, but I persevered. I named it Nonner's Kitchen. Traditional Italian, much like Pupper's Place, because I knew those recipes better than my own name. However, I did everything correctly. Brand new, up-to-code equipment. Proper ventilation, a walk-in cooler that could withstand a blizzard. And I hired that unhappy sous chef, along with 2 of the top-line cooks from other local establishments. I contacted all my supplier connections and negotiated better terms than Pupper's Place had ever received because I was promising them consistent business and a potential for growth. I also retained a marketing consultant, a step my parents had always been against. We established a social media presence, had professional photographs taken, held a soft launch for local food critics, and ensured our image was modern and appealing while maintaining authentic Italian roots. The restaurant was located 3 miles from Pupper's Place. Near enough for townspeople to see it as a direct competitor, but distant enough that I wasn't technically vying for the same street corner. We opened our doors 10 months after my departure. My parents found out, of course, and my dad called me from a number I hadn't yet blocked. "What in the world do you think you are doing?" he shouted. "This is a betrayal. Family does not compete against family." "Well, family doesn't give away someone's life's work to another person," I responded calmly. "I built a restaurant for you, and now I'm building one for myself. You're using our recipes, our suppliers. They are Italian recipes, Dad. You didn't invent pasta, and the suppliers do business with anyone who pays them. It seems they prefer me." He threatened legal action. I told him to proceed. The recipes were from his mother, my grandmother, who had taught me herself. She passed away 5 years ago, and I'm quite certain she would have supported me. Besides, I had altered everything just enough to ensure any lawsuit would be dismissed. Nonner's Kitchen was an instant success. It turns out that when you serve fresh, expertly prepared Italian food in a clean, contemporary setting with excellent service, people take notice. We received glowing reviews and were busy from the very first day. I worked just as hard as I had at Pupper's Place, but this time, it was truly mine, and every triumph was my own. Meanwhile, Pupper's Place was in decline. My brother had enacted his cost-saving initiatives. The fresh pasta was replaced with dried. The homemade sauces were now sourced from a supplier, and the menu had been condensed, meaning half the dishes were eliminated. The patrons noticed, and the reviews began to plummet. But that wasn't the retribution. That was simply karma for their actions. My retaliation was set in motion 3 months after our grand opening. I was thriving, building my enterprise with a genuine sense of pride and ownership. And then I recalled those health code violations, the fact that my brother, with all his business acumen, likely had no clue they existed, and the likelihood they had worsened since my departure because I was the only one who knew how to mitigate them. And, most importantly, the fact that customers could potentially become ill. I deliberated over it. To be honest, a part of me just wanted to let my business flourish and theirs fail naturally. But the violations were real and dangerous. And with me no longer managing them, who knew the state of things? So, I placed an anonymous tip with the county health department. I did not embellish or fabricate anything, I simply reported what I knew to be true: specific issues with temperature control, pest management, equipment sanitation, and structural problems. I noted that I was a former employee who had brought up these issues multiple times only to be disregarded. Their health inspector arrived for a surprise visit about 3 weeks later. They failed in a spectacular fashion. The inspector discovered everything I had mentioned and more. It turned out that without my daily management, the problems had escalated. The walk-in was now operating at 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Mouse droppings were apparent in the dry storage, and the grease trap was a significant fire risk. The mold on the ceiling had expanded. They were cited for 15 major violations, some so severe that the inspector mandated an immediate closure until the most critical issues, the mouse infestation and the walk-in temperature, were rectified. They were granted permission to reopen once those were fixed, with 30 days to resolve the remaining issues and pass a follow-up inspection. I learned all of this from a friend who still worked there. My brother, apparently, went into a panic. Addressing all of that would require a serious amount of money they didn't have, as business was down and he had been cutting corners everywhere. He attempted the bare minimum, patching the most severe problems in hopes of passing, but it was not enough. The reinspection revealed ongoing violations. Consequently, the health department shut them down again, pending full compliance. That's when their situation became truly dire. A shutdown meant zero revenue. They still had rent, utilities, and loan payments, and now they also had to fund all these repairs. My brother took out a second mortgage on his home to finance it, and my parents had to dip into their retirement savings. They did manage to bring the restaurant up to code and reopen, but they had lost all momentum. Regular customers had moved on, many to Noner's Kitchen. The closure had become local news, and people were discussing how Pupper's Place had been shut down for health code violations. Even after reopening, they were facing an insurmountable challenge. Meanwhile, Noner's Kitchen was flourishing. We had attracted a large portion of their former regulars. We were even being featured in regional food publications. I had hired 3 additional staff members. I was finally making money, real money, for the first time in my adult life. Pupper's Place struggled on for another 6 months before they permanently closed. The numbers just didn't add up. They declared bankruptcy, sold off the equipment and furnishings to settle debts, and my parents lost a significant part of their retirement. And by the way, everyone, based on what you've heard, would you have acted as OP did, or do you believe OP went too far and is actually in the wrong, considering the outcome of his actions? Let me know in the comments. Furthermore, my brother lost his house and had to move back in with our parents. I heard all of this through mutual acquaintances in town. None of my family members contacted me directly. I suspect they knew I was the one who called the health department. Who else would have known about those specific issues, though they could never prove it? And frankly, what could they say? I had reported legitimate violations that could have made people ill. A year after I launched Noner's Kitchen, my grandmother's sister, my great-aunt, came to dine. She was 92 and as sharp as ever. She ordered the gnocchi and remarked that it tasted just like her sister used to make. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said. "She always said you were the one who truly understood cooking. Not just the recipes, but the soul of it." "Thank you," I replied. "That means the world to me." "She also would have smacked your parents upside the head for being such fools," she added. "What were they thinking, giving that restaurant to your brother?" I laughed. It was the first time I had genuinely laughed about the entire ordeal. "They made their decision," I said. "And you made yours," she replied. "Clearly the better one." She became a regular after that, bringing her friends each week. They would occupy the same table, debating whose grandmother made a superior braciota. It was precisely the kind of atmosphere I had envisioned. I did eventually receive a message from my mom. She sent a letter, a physical paper letter, not a text or an email. It was brief. She said they had made an error, that they had underestimated me, and that they were sorry. My father's signature was absent. I suppose even in their apology, they couldn't maintain a united front. I did not reply. Perhaps that makes me heartless, but I had dedicated 12 years to proving my worth to them, and it was never sufficient. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life waiting for them to finally acknowledge my value. My brother, however, did get in touch. He appeared at Noner's kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon while we were closed for prep. He looked awful, older, weary, and defeated. "I need a job," he said without any preamble. "I'm broke. The only offers I'm getting are for entry-level retail management, and it won't be enough to cover my debts. I'll work in the kitchen, do anything you need." I looked at him for a long moment. A part of me wanted to send him away, to tell him to forge his own path as I had been forced to. But a larger part of me remembered the feeling of being dismissed, of having your contributions devalued. "No," I said. "You don't get to waltz in here and take a job you're unqualified for simply because you're in a tough spot. You don't understand this industry. You demonstrated that when you ran Pupper's place into the ground." "I made errors," he said. "I didn't know what I was doing." "Exactly. You didn't know what you were doing, yet you took it anyway because Mom and Dad handed it to you. You didn't earn it. You didn't learn it. You just accepted it because you could. So that's it? You're just going to let me struggle because I made one mistake?" "I'm going to let you figure out your own life," I said, just like I had to. "You want a job? Go apply somewhere. Start from the bottom, learn the trade, and maybe in a few years, if you actually know what you're doing, I might think about hiring you. But you don't get to jump to the front of the line just because we're related." He left, and I have not seen him since. Noner's kitchen is now in its 3rd year. We've expanded, added a private dining area, and started a catering service. We've brought on a pastry chef who creates the most incredible tiramisu I've ever tasted. I am currently mentoring a young chef who reminds me of myself at his age, eager to learn, hardworking, and passionate about food. And I ensure he is paid well. I make sure all my employees receive fair wages, benefits, and time off. I repair equipment as soon as it breaks. I keep the establishment fully compliant with codes, and I listen when people voice their concerns. They made their choice. They picked my brother because he had a degree, because he was the golden child, and because they were blinded by their own favoritism and failed to see who was actually putting in the work. And I made my choice. I chose myself. It was the best decision I have ever made. And our next submission is a fantastic malicious compliance story you won't want to miss. It's titled, "Ex-Girlfriend Wants to Shut Off Our Power." No problem. So, I was cohabiting with my girlfriend and a housemate, and we divided all bills equally, even though each bill was under one person's name. At least, that was the plan. I naively ended up helping my girlfriend with her share, which meant I was paying for most of them entirely. The lease was in my name, the electricity in my girlfriend's, and so on. Well, I eventually grew tired of her behavior, the arguments, smelly gerbils, and her refusal to do chores, and we ended our relationship. It was a difficult breakup. She took an extended time to move out, making sure to extract every possible penny before she finally departed. The moment she left, I set up a new electricity account under my name. A week later, I received a confirmation letter in the mail, but I also got the electricity bill for the final 3 months my ex had lived with us. I opened it without thinking. We couldn't even pay it if we wanted to, as the account was in her name. I sent her a text, "Hey, the electricity bill arrived. It's $120. So, come by and get $40 from each of us." X, where's the other $40? We agreed I wouldn't pay bills after I moved out. As if she ever did before. You were still residing here during the billing period. This is ridiculous. I'm not paying a cent. We had a deal. Well, you can either come get our portion or you can handle it yourself. X, as I see it, you can either bring the full $120 to my place or enjoy the darkness. You've got me there. At this point, I realized she was unaware that I had opened my own account with the utility provider. She believed that by not paying, the company would simply disconnect our power. A clever way to squeeze another $40 out of us, right? Well, that's not quite how it unfolded. A few weeks passed, and I received another letter from the electricity company addressed to her. It was likely a late payment notice. I texted to inform her, and she replied, "LOL, why are you so desperate to talk to me? You know what needs to be done." Another letter for her arrived, this one probably with added late fees. I can only guess, as I never opened them. I messaged her, and she responded, "I thought I told you never to contact me again." As you wish, madam. More letters began to arrive from a different address. A quick Google search of the new sender's address revealed it was a collection agency. Scary stuff, really. It was a shame I couldn't say a word to her. Now, about 2 or 3 months later, I got a phone call from my ex. She was screaming, "What is this? They are calling my parents' house. I've got all these late fees, debt collectors." I told her that if she wanted our share of the bill, she knew what to do. Recognizing she had no alternative, she conceded and came for the money. My roommate and I did not contribute a single cent towards the late fees, and I likely had a very smug look on my face as I handed her my final payment. And the next one is a beautiful new petty revenge story titled, "I took an hour-long commute to get my coworker in trouble." So, I reside about 20 minutes from my office by car, and I drive in daily. It is significantly more convenient for me than the 1-hour journey on public transportation, which requires multiple transfers in traffic. My shifts are also irregular, varying between midnight and 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. starts. My senior colleague also drives to work, but his shifts are consistently at 8 a.m. We had a forthcoming visit to a supplier located about another hour's drive from our office. I was already frustrated with my senior colleague because, despite it being entirely his responsibility, he had delegated all the tasks of coordinating the visit to me. The only remaining question was who would be driving. In the month preceding the visit, my senior colleague kept making suggestive remarks about his reluctance to drive or asking if I had been to that area before. I had no desire to add chauffeur to my list of duties, so I consistently deflected his hints. One day, I overheard him telling my manager that we still lacked a concrete plan and that he would figure something out. I waited for 3 days for that something to materialize, but all I received were more of the same leading comments. So, a week before the visit, I began leaving my car at home and commuting daily. I woke up an hour earlier and endured the whole process. I didn't mind the extra time, as I was motivated by pure spite, and it gave me a chance to catch up on my podcasts. After 3 days of this, my manager took notice. I concocted a false narrative for him about my brother being in town and how I had lent him my car so he could go sightseeing with his girlfriend. I also composed an email, which I sent to my manager and my senior colleague, inquiring with the supplier about how to reach them because our transportation arrangements had fallen through. To say the least, my manager was absolutely furious with my senior colleague, demanding to know if this was his idea of figuring something out. He also chastised him for being irresponsible and offloading so much work onto his junior, calling his behavior shameful. My senior colleague begrudgingly drove us to and from the supplier's location. Coincidentally, my brother went home the day of our visit, so I arrived at the office the following morning in my car. And yeah, guys, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again.